We just passed the 6-month bloody anniversary of the late massacre and genocide on the population of Gaza and the West Bank in Palestine. 6 months of death, destruction, and disease. And despite the despair and the sorrow, it's still with great pleasure to welcome our guest of today, Norman Finkelstein. Finkelstein, who was born in New York to Jewish Holocaust survivors. You are an international acclaimed historian and author, as you've written several books on the subject of Palestine. Both your parents were in concentration camps. Your father and mother's families were exterminated by the Nazis. I've also written that your mother, she made a great investment in humanitarian causes which she brought to you. So your mother, who experienced the horrors of the Holocaust, raised you up to be ein Mensch, you can say, a decent human being. So maybe as the first question, I'd like to ask what kind of conversations you had as a child around the kitchen table. Did you talk about Palestine, about the Palestinians? What were your parents' opinion on the whole situation?
My parents were very political beings. They followed the news closely. They followed current events closely. They watched all the news programs on television. When I was growing up, the main issues were the war in Vietnam and the civil rights movement, and also, of course, the Cold War. Palestine was not a significant issue up until 1967. I was already 12 years old. It was really only momentarily a big issue. The war began and ended very quickly, and it pretty much, again, disappeared from public conversation. What did happen after the 1967 war is that the Nazi Holocaust itself became a fixture of American life. Up until 1967, the Nazi Holocaust didn't figure really at all in American life. If you were a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust, and there were very few survivors. Nowadays, or beginning around 30 years ago, everybody began to call themselves Holocaust survivors. But they weren't Holocaust survivors as it was originally understood. Originally, the term referred to those Jews who were in the ghettos, the labor camps, and the concentration camps. Those were Holocaust survivors. At the end of World War II, there were under 100,000 who fit into that category. So already by the 1970s, you could say there may have been, or let's say by the year 2000, there may have been about 25,000 survivors. But when the Holocaust industry realized they can extract what was called money for needy Holocaust victims, they start to inflate the numbers, and everybody became a Holocaust survivor. Every European Jew became a Holocaust survivor. In any event, the Nazi Holocaust didn't figure in American life when I was growing up until, you could say, the mid-1970s. Then it started to enter American life.
Okay.
So it wasn't talked about. Nobody was interested in it. I had very, very smart friends, and we were all attuned to the politics of the time. It was the 1960s, where everybody felt the political moment. But I could say without any doubt that not a single friend and not a single parent of any friend expressed any interest whatsoever in what happened to my parents during the Nazi Holocaust. It was not there's no interest in it. So growing up, as I said, most of the conversation was about Vietnam, the civil rights movement at home, the Soviet Union. And when Palestine, I would say Palestine first became a household issue with the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And then came the Palestinian Intifada in 1987. And at that point, my parents began to express strong opinions, which were very hostile to what Israel was doing.
So this is around the time also when you start to have a bigger conscience towards what's happening in Palestine.
I became involved in June 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon. Mm-hmm. It's forgotten now just how devastating that invasion was. It lasted 3.5 months from June 6th or June 5th or June 5th, 1982 until the end of September with the Sabra and Shatila massacres in Lebanon, in the Lebanese refugee camps. And the estimates are 18,000 Palestinians and Lebanese, overwhelmingly about 85% were civilians. It was a huge bloodletting. It's obviously now been superseded by what's happened in Gaza. But until October 7th, the worst destruction Israel inflicted was the June 1982 war, and that's when I became involved.
I read your book some years back, The Holocaust Industry, where you describe how the Holocaust narrative has been misused to justify Israel's actions, and also how this Holocaust industry absolve any form of criticism towards Israel. Do you believe that this Holocaust abuse and narrative has been broken today, or is there still a long way to go?
I think its effectiveness has been dulled by overuse, like the sharp edge of a knife gets dulled by overuse. Israel, of course, still tries to play the Holocaust card. So, for example, the very first thing that was said about October 7th immediately is, quote, the biggest killing of Jews since the Nazi Holocaust. What did it have to do with the Nazi Holocaust?
Yeah.
It was, first of all, at the height of Nazi Holocaust, the Nazis were killing 10,000 Jews a day in Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. What does that have to do with the figure of what happened on October 7th?
Yeah.
What is the common denominator except Jews were killed? It was just a purposeful invocation to drag the Nazi Holocaust in from the back door.
Yeah.
And then when I read what happened, and I studied what happened, I can tell you for certain, images of Auschwitz did not come to my mind. It was a massacre, fine. If you want to call it a massacre like My Lai during the Vietnam War, you want to call it a massacre like the World Trade Center, okay, I could see comparisons there. But the Nazi Holocaust, sorry, there's no connection, there's no relationship.
No.
It was just a deliberate infiltration and manipulation of the Nazi Holocaust.
We begin today's show in Gaza, where 18 Palestinians have died after Israeli forces opened fire Friday on a protest near the Gaza Strip's eastern border with Israel. As many as 1,700 Palestinians were wounded. The deaths and injuries came as 30,000 Gaza residents gathered near the wall as part of a planned 6-week-long nonviolent protest against the blockade of Gaza and to demand the right of return for Palestinian refugees.
Some years back, you were in Denmark and you were making a presentation at the Copenhagen University, and I was attending that event. And I remember very clearly that it's I don't exactly remember what year it was, maybe 2016 or something. And I remember you came up with a thesis, how to help the Palestinian cause. And I remember it was like kind of the premise for the whole talk, that you had an idea how the Palestinians could become closer to freedom. And you presented the idea of the people of Gaza should go together as a demonstration peacefully up against the fence, so the whole world could see that they were peaceful people, maybe also helping bringing an understanding to the desperate situation. Some time later, it actually happened. The Palestinians walked up to the fence peacefully, and they were gunned down in hundreds by the Israeli army snipers. 800 people killed and several wounded in a few days. And so I thought of you actually when that happened. Your suggestion. They actually did what you suggested them to do. And I hope you agree with the way I present the matter, or you please correct me, but I would like to know what happened in your mind when you saw what the Israelis, how they reacted
Very
to something
simple.
you actually suggested.
Simple.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What the Palestinians did was right, but nonviolence can't work unless there's an international reaction.
No.
There has to be the whole purpose of nonviolence. It's not just a moral stance. It's also a political tactic. And one has to distinguish between the two. Gandhi was, by moral principle, a exponent of nonviolence, but Gandhi also was a very shrewd political analyst. He was deceptive in his public presentation, but he was politically very sharp. Remember, he was trained as a lawyer. And the early part of his life, he was involved in legal representation in South Africa and then later in India. He was a very shrewd, cagey guy. And he had a certain understanding, not just of morality, he had a certain understanding of politics. His view was that if your goals, if your objectives were pure, and your methods for achieving your objectives were pure, then you would evoke the sympathy of the bystanders if you were willing to suffer physical sacrifice and death. He believed that your self-sacrifice for a pure goal would evoke pity from bystanders and move them to act. Well, the goals of the Gazans, in particular, the first goal, which was to end the siege, the goal was pure because under international humanitarian law, the siege of Gaza, the blockade of Gaza, constitutes collective punishment. So ending the collective punishment was a pure objective, a pure goal. And their methods were pure. It was overwhelmingly, for the first 6 weeks, overwhelmingly nonviolent. The problem was when the Israelis predictably started to target them, in particular children, medics, journalists, and disabled people. When Israel began to target them, it didn't evoke any pity from the international community.
No.
The international community either said Hamas was behind everything, or they just ignored it. And with no reaction from the international community, it had to fail. It wasn't their failure. It was the failure of the international community. I didn't expect that would happen. I thought the international community would be moved and driven to action by the Palestinian nonviolence. It didn't happen. I was wrong.
So at that time, you can say that we already saw the consequences of what was going to happen today. If something, what's going to happen on the 7th of October, like we got a pretext of what the Israelis were going to do and how the world was going to react.
Look, and what we know for sure is Hamas attempted several diplomatic settlements of the conflict after they won office in 2006. There were many proposals put forth by them. You could say the proposals were imperfect. Fine, I won't quarrel with that. But what you can't say is that Hamas didn't attempt a diplomatic solution of the conflict. All of their attempts were rejected outright by Israel, the US, and the EU. Hamas then supported. It didn't originally create, it supported the nonviolent resistance. And the nonviolent resistance was also a dead end for the Palestinians in Gaza. So after attempting a diplomatic settlement, attempting nonviolent resistance, and by October 6th, it was clear that a deal would soon be made between the Saudis, the Israelis, and the Americans, which meant for the people of Gaza that the regional conflict would be resolved over their head, and that they would just languish and die in Gaza. That was the fate that was set for them. And in my opinion, they had no options by the evening of October 6th. Whether I agree with the option they chose, atrocities occurred, significant atrocities occurred. They should not be denied, but I won't condemn the perpetrators. I will condemn the atrocities. I won't condemn the perpetrators of the atrocities.
No.
I don't see that they had any alternative. Most of the young men who burst the gates of Gaza on October 7th had been born into a concentration camp. They lived the whole of their lives in a concentration camp, and they were destined to die in that concentration camp. I won't condemn them.
No. I remember just after the 7th of October, one of the first interviews I saw with you, you said something like you almost given up on the cause and you had withdrawn yourself from the Palestinian issue. But then because of the onslaught in Gaza, you were like drawn back into the cause, put on your good clothes and your armor and went back to fight. This is my interpretation, the last sentence, but do I remember right? You said something like that? You were drawn back?
Yes, I had, for the same reason that the people of Gaza had given up by October 2023. The cause looked totally hopeless, and I couldn't see investing more and more time at the end of my life in a cause that seemed utterly unwinnable, that the diplomacy failed, the nonviolence has failed. And so by 2020, I had given up and I had moved on to other things. I wasn't proud of myself, and many people criticized me privately, said, why aren't you doing more on Gaza? Why aren't you doing more on Gaza? I said, well, I'll tell you why. I spent the better part of a year writing a book on Gaza. It sold 350 copies. And of those 350 copies, I myself purchased half of them. Nobody was interested anymore. So it was just whistling in the wind.
Yeah.
So I gave up. And then along came October 7th. And I considered myself, and I still consider myself, the most competent person in the world to speak on the subject by the sheer investment of time and energy over 42 years in general, and on Gaza for 15 years.
Yeah, I'm sure many would agree on that. I don't have the same age as you have, but I can definitely speak into the feeling of suddenly life suddenly have another purpose. Thousands of people around the world with a pro-Palestinian stand or with humanitarian stand.
I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-justice and I'm pro-truth.
Yes, this is the most important thing.
I stand firmly by what truth says. I am not aware of any contradiction between truth and justice, and so I'm for that. if Jews were in that concentration camp and it was Palestinians surrounding that camp, I would be supporting the Jews.
Definitely. Yeah.
Period, full stop. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
No, I agree with you on this part. And I hope also all the same people who's behind the Palestinian cause now would do exactly the same if Jews or any other people in the world were in the same situation. What I was trying to say is also that I understand the feeling of suddenly life had a different purpose now. Suddenly it had a purpose, which also is you can easily go into. I felt it myself as well, the way that suddenly, especially I think also because of Palestine, everything became meaningless in life. But after the 7th of October, now I don't have a doubt what the rest of my life should be about. And I'm sure many people are grateful that you came back in your armor, because you're doing a difference now. I'd like to ask you, with you having a Jewish background, can you tell me something about is there something in Judaism that can give a reason for extremism, the same way that we see also elements in Islam are being misused by, for example, ISIS? Is there a way in Judaism, like it is also in Islam, where people choose to interpret it in a fanatical and harmful ways that's actually goes against the fundamental values of religion?
I know less about Judaism than you do. Mm-hmm. I'm not exaggerating. I grew up in an atheist home. Mm-hmm. We weren't allowed to talk about God in our home. My parents believed the whole notion of God was a complete idiocy. Because of their experiences during World War II, they would not entertain the notion that there is a God, let alone a all-wise, all-knowing, and all-just God. So I never studied Judaism as an adult. I probably should have, just as an intellectual inquiry, but I didn't, so I can't speak to it. What I can speak to is Jews. I grew up in an old Jewish neighborhood. All my friends were Jewish. Up until after college, I really knew no non-Jews. None. All my friends were Jewish. It was an old Jewish milieu, and it was a very closed world. We cared about one thing, or two things, which were related: academic success and professional success. That's all we cared about. You studied hard, you worked hard, you had to read, you had to be a reader. You had to acquit yourself with honor and distinction in the academic realm. And those were all Jews. They were all Jews, and very successful. The current Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, the U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he went to my high school. Bernie Sanders went to my high school.
Okay.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice, went to my high school. 5 Nobel laureates in physics, chemistry, and economics went to my high school. It was a public high school. It wasn't an elite private. It was very modest, lower middle class, but very, very ambitious, like the Asian community today in the United States. Very ambitious and eventually very successful. I know Jews, and there are elements of that everybody knows in the Jewish tradition of this notion of chosenness, specialness, and just the secular success of Jews. The Jewish story is an incredible success story. In the 20th century, 25% of Nobel laureates are Jewish, even though Jews represent like 0.02% of the world's population. And that kind of success, it goes to your head. That's inevitable. That you begin to think Jews are special and that everybody else is less special. And in particular, Arabs, Black people, they are less special. And that kind of Jewish supremacist mindset is not a healthy mindset. It's not a mindset that's going to be sensitive to human suffering especially when that mindset is concentrated in the power of a state.
Yeah.
Israel is not a Zionist state. I don't think Zionism has much to do with Israel. Israel is a Jewish supremacist state. That's the reason Netanyahu keeps getting reelected in Israel, the longest running prime minister in Israel's history by far now. The reason he keeps getting elected is when Israelis see Netanyahu, they see themselves. He's an obnoxious Jewish supremacist. And that's the Israeli population. Obnoxious, heartless, merciless, ruthless Jewish supremacists. Mm-hmm. That's Netanyahu. That's the Israeli population. Personally, I don't find Israel Jewish. I don't feel a conflict between me being Jewish and the state of Israel being Jewish, because I don't think of Israel as Jewish. In my generation, for us, a Jew meant somebody who was very cerebral, as I said, academically very ambitious and competitive, and also somebody who was creative. So when we thought of Jews in my generation, we would typically think of Woody Allen. Yeah. He was a typical Jew, Woody Allen. He was creative. He was a bit scrawny, physically fragile. You couldn't see him in a military uniform. You couldn't see him anywhere near an army. No. You couldn't see him killing anybody. That was for us a Jew. Creative, smart, clever, but not physically robust, let alone murderous. So for me, that's a Jew. Franz Kafka is a Jew. The big ears. Einstein is a Jew. Not a Benjamin Netanyahu. He's a thug. He's a gangster. He's just a gangster. He lies with such ease. Yesterday, I was listening to just a little interview with him, and he says, how did he put it? For every Israeli soldier killed, now I got it. For every Gaza civilian killed, a Hamas militant is killed. For every Hamas militant killed, a civilian is killed. And the interviewer said, are you saying the ratio is 1-to-1 in Gaza? He said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Of course, the whole statement is completely insane. The lying comes with such ease to him.
Is even now openly in the Israeli media, the AI systems like called Levanta and Where's Daddy, where they kill a whole family just to hit a foot soldier from Hamas.
A lot is being said about lavender. I don't attach that much importance to it. Okay. What lavender is a more efficient method to do what Israel always does. If you go back and look at 2014 Operation Protective Edge, you go back and look at 2008-9 Operation Cast Lead, they were all the time bombing homes and killing 13 members of a family here, 14 members of a family there. Mm-hmm. That's their standard operating procedure. And then they would claim there was a Hamas militant in the house, Yeah. That's how they always carried on. Now they have a computer program that makes it more efficient. But it's not. If you read the story, this computer generates Hamas militants. You know what a Hamas militant is? I'm not exaggerating. I know the record very well. A Hamas militant is defined as any Gaza male over 21 years of age. That's a Hamas militant. They do not distinguish between Hamas militants on the one hand and any Gaza male over 21 years old. Okay. When they give figures, how many Hamas militants they killed. You know what those figures are? how many males they killed over 21 years old. That's how they've always operated. If you go back and look at the statistics, I have them. I go through them in my book. They just classify any Hamas male as over 21 years of age.
So he could be a baker or shoemaker or hairdresser.
That's correct. If they're walking in the battlefield and they see a dead male body over 21, they tally it a Hamas terrorist. That's how they've always operated. And half the time, if you look at the human rights reports, they just bombed houses where there was not even any men in it.
No.
I remember there was one case, they killed 13 people, 12 of them were women and children, and there was one 70-year-old man. I mean, but that's just one that leaps to mind. It's over and over again. So all this talk about lavender, to me, is beside the point. It's just a more efficient way to carry out what they've always done.
Yeah. The future. What's going to happen now? Has the West, has it outplayed its role? And when the bomb dust has settled, many are talking about the global South will set the agenda for the Middle East now, including Palestine. Do the US and Europe still have a lot to say, you believe?
I think this is all just hot air. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
No.
It's totally unpredictable at this point. There is no, Israel's still determined to achieve what the prime minister calls a military victory, an unambiguous military victory.
Yeah.
What exactly that means, I haven't a clue. We're still awaiting what the Iranian retaliation is going to be, and whether that's going to then set off what Israel wants, namely drag the US into a war with Iran. There's still the question of Israel's reaction to the Hezbollah occasional attacks in the north. I don't think, look, 6 months is a horror story for sure. But remember, wars can last a very long time. Ukraine is now over 2 years. World War II went from 1939 to 45. I don't think there's any way to predict how long this is going to last and where it's going to lead.
No.
And I don't see any point in doing so. I think we need clarity about what's happening and what needs to be done.
Your parents, if they were alive today, well, how do you think their stance would be on the situation?
Look, you don't have to ask my parents. Jews now are the younger age cohort of Jews. They're totally opposed to what Israel is doing.
Yeah.
I would say a large, it's hard to be too precise. A large section of American Jews now are either opposed to what Israel is doing because it's morally wrong, or because it's become a huge embarrassment. And they don't want to be associated with the man-made famine in Gaza, where there are half the population are children. You don't want,
No.
whatever picture you open up of what's going on there, there's always swarms of children. You can't photograph Gaza without swarms of children being in the photograph.
No.
American Jews don't want to be associated with that. So you don't have to ask what my parents think. I think a large section of American Jews now, either, as I said, from moral conviction or from embarrassment, want this horror to end.
So you feel it also in your generation, more and more Jews, they are taking a stand?
My generation, no. Look, I'm 70 years old. Okay. You don't teach an old dog new tricks.
No. So it's more from the
young. My generation is, it's not terrible. Mm-hmm. I would say you will find it hard for a Jew in my generation to defend what's going on. Aside from, the Orthodox Jewish lunatics and the Israelis, because there are a lot of Israelis in the US, the Israeli lunatics. But your average American Jew, my generation, I think they would find it difficult to defend what Israel is doing and would prefer to change the subject.
Yeah.
That's my impression, but I could be wrong. And usually I don't like to put too much stock in my impressions. I'd rather stick to the factual record. And I'm going to have to end this now because I have to get work done.
Thank you very much. It's been a great honor, and I hope I have the chance to talk to you again.
But very, very, very nice meeting you.
You too. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.